I just want to welcome everybody tonight. Thank you so much for joining us for the first of 3 events for the Pennridge Community Partnership. My name is Lisa Harden. I am a community member and the mobilizer for this partnership. I'd like to give you a brief overview of who we are. This partnership was created with the mission of equipping and empowering the residents of the Pennridge community with the resources they need to take action and initiative for positive change that benefits all in the community. This partnership is between the Pennridge School District, St. Luke's Penn Foundation, and Grandview Hospital. If you have any questions about this partnership, go to the district website and click on our link. Without further ado, I would like to present the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on children and teens. We have 2 amazing people presenting tonight from St. Luke's University Health Network. One of our presenters is Amie Allanson-Dundon. She is the Network Director of Clinical Therapy Services of Psychiatry. Her specialties include, but are not limited to, the treatment of addiction and substance abuse, disorders, trauma, critical incident stress, and mood disorders. Jason Frei is a school-based clinical coordinator, psychotherapist, and founder of YES program, Your Emotional Strength Supported. Jason is nationally certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. He has presented at several conferences on topics such as human trafficking, motivational interviewing, clinical assessments in residential programs, and using genogram software for practice and research. Jason has also published articles on motivational interviewing, stages of change, and narrative therapy. He is currently enrolled in a certification program for geek therapy, which uses video games, comic books, anime, and popular culture to teach therapeutic concepts and skills. Before Jason and Amie come on, I just want to remind everybody to save their questions until the end. Jason and Amie will do a question and answer when they're finished with their presentation. So if you can refrain from putting anything in the chat until the end, we would greatly appreciate it so we can keep the presentation going smooth and without distraction. So thank you all again. We look forward to seeing you with this new initiative, and we look forward to introducing Jason and Amie. Take it away.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Frei from St. Luke's. Thank you all for coming. We're going to present to you tonight for the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on children and teens and their transitioning back to school. Last year, obviously, with COVID-19 was difficult for a lot of people, both in and out of school, the students, the parents, the teachers, just everyone has been affected by this. Tonight, we're going to look specifically on the effects on children and teens and what we can do to help them with their back to school. Let's see.
I just want to say welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Amie Allanson-Dundon. I'm Network Director, Clinical Therapy Services for St. Luke's. Thank you for the kind introduction. We're excited to be with you tonight. I'm going to let Jason start, and then I'm going to come in a little bit.
All right, thank you. So we're going to start with COVID-19's impact on child and adolescent mental health. Let's see here. So the child and adolescent mental health, children and teens have experienced some major life disruptions as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Those life disruptions have to do with, going to school or taking part in certain school programs, sports, clubs, things like that. It's also disrupted their socialization, how they've been able to meet with their friends, meet with family. For the majority of the population, we were kind of quarantined in our homes, and we couldn't have our day-to-day normal operations. So in May of 2020, a Gallup poll found that 29% of parents believe their child's mental or emotional health was harmed. So 29%, and that was just in May of 2020. In October of 2020, further research showed that 31% of parents said that their child's mental or emotional health was worse than before the pandemic. So we started with, May, 29% believe that their mental and emotional health was harmed. And then in October, just a few months later, 31% said that their child's mental and emotional health was worse than when the pandemic started. In May of 2021, so this year, more than 25% of high school students reported worsened emotional cognitive health. So these are the actual students themselves saying, yes, this is affecting me. And then, let's see here, in February of 2021, only 1/3 of high school students felt they were able to cope with their sources of stress. So 1 out of every 3 kids said that they could cope with stress. The other 2/3 were negatively impacted. Here we have a graph from the KFF analysis from the National Survey of Children's Health. This was in 2018 to 2019. So this was the percentage of children with anxiety, depression, and ADD, ADHD, which are the 3 main mental health issues that we've seen affected by COVID-19. And you can see here in all children, so ages 3 to 17 is the dark blue, and then adolescents from 12 to 17 is the light blue. So you can pretty much see here that this has really affected adolescents a lot more than any other children. This graph here shows the share of parents that were actually reporting the worsening mental health for their children. And these are children ages 5 to 12. So you can see that 22.1% of parents reported an overall worsening of mental health for their children just overall. You got 4.4% with elevated depression, 6.3% with anxiety, and 9.2% with just psychological stress in general. Not necessarily the depression and the anxiety, but just that feeling of unease, that feeling that something is wrong and not right. If we look here, this is some health insurance claims from 2020. This really shows a picture of what's going on from the mental health standpoint from the insurance. So mental health claims for 13 to 18-year-olds doubled over the same months in the previous year. So in 2020, we have twice as many kids or adolescents ages 13 to 18 getting services than in 2019. Self-harm has doubled from April 2019 to April 2020. So these are actual claim lines. This isn't the actual amount of kids that are self-harming. These are the kids that are actually been sent for help and are getting their insurance to pay for them to have help. Same thing with obsessive compulsive disorder and tic disorders. We've been seeing a huge increase in this. Obsessive compulsive disorder is the feeling the need to do things that are a repetitious pattern or things that are not normal. And tic disorder is people that have some psychomotor agitation where they're displaying maybe like, a normal tic where you would see in a face or the arms, but also their speech as well. And then, of course, you get that overall increase from ages 13 to 18 in claim lines for generalized anxiety disorder, depressive disorders, and adjustment disorders. And adjustment disorders are any children who are having a hard time just adjusting to the change that's going on, that they're not necessarily just anxious or just depressed. There's a whole bunch of things going on for them. All right. Here we have mental health related emergency department visits increased, and this is just between April of 2020 and October of 2020. So we're looking at just a 6-month period here where visits for children 5 to 11 increased 24%, and then teens 12 to 19 increased 31%. These are just emergency visits, and the majority of these are for mental health. All right, Amie.
Thanks, Jason. So Jason just outlined for us the increase in mental health concerns and issues that we're seeing, and the use of substances is absolutely equally impressive in terms of what we're seeing. So according to the CDC, in June of 2020, 13% of Americans reported starting or increasing substance use during COVID-19 due to increased stress and emotions. So that's 13% of Americans, right? Not just kiddos. But if we think about that, and 13% reported starting or increasing, even if 75% of them are adults, most of them are going to have children living in the house watching their increased drug or alcohol use. So remember that any stats that we talk about that are adult related, there are little eyes watching those adults. The Overdose Detection Mapping Application Program, odmap.org, reported an 18% increase in overdoses nationwide in 2020 overall compared to 2019. And we know that at St. Luke's, our paramedics, our first responders, our EMTs, our emergency room docs, our trauma docs, certainly in our counties, Bucks, Northampton, Lehigh, all of our local counties are doing that mapping as well, and seeing a huge increase in overdoses, but also in Narcan use. So we've seen increases in the quantity and frequency of drug use. So, and this is children all the way up to adults. So how much of a drug or alcohol somebody is using and how often is increasing. We're also seeing an increase in first-time users, people that may never ever have tried drugs, used drugs, anywhere from vaping to marijuana to nicotine, all the way up to your harder substances. So first-time users for drug and alcohol, opioids, especially with fentanyl due to drug supply and availability. In this area of Pennsylvania, we've seen a huge increase of opiates laced with fentanyl, or fentanyl being introduced to replace opioids, and folks that are buying or using on the street aren't necessarily knowing that. 55% increase in alcohol use, huge. If you think about 55% increase, that's a massive number of people that say, yeah, I'm drinking more. And 18% reporting significant increase. And we consider significant increase at least doubled of what they had been using. We know that rates of adolescent marijuana and alcohol use stayed steady. So the adolescents, we're talking 13 to 17, they're saying that their marijuana and alcohol use, and their pediatricians and doctors and what they're reporting, that stayed pretty steady. What we have seen a huge increase of is vaping. And that's nicotine and marijuana. Kiddos are putting marijuana in their vapes. They're also putting other drugs in their vapes, but we're seeing a large increase of vaping or the use of drugs through the vaping process. So you can go back, Jason. One. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about self-medication, right? What does that mean? So we know that for kiddos and adults, if we are not feeling well, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever realm that we put ourselves on that wheel, as human beings, we look to self-soothe. And if we don't have healthy coping skills, or we're in a pandemic and we don't have access to the normal outlets that we normally have access to, the tendency to look for something to help numb us or escape increases. We call that self-medication. And this is a slide that just to show you the correlation between certain psychiatric disorders and how that correlates to your risk for increased substance abuse. So folks that have a diagnosed antisocial personality disorder have a 15.5% increased risk for substance use. And this has really nothing to do with COVID, other than this is outside of a pandemic. This is what we know. People with manic episodes, 14.5% increased risk for substance abuse. Folks with schizophrenia, 10.1% increased risk for substance abuse. Panic disorder, which is under the anxiety umbrella, right? 4.3% increased risk. Major depression, 3.4% increased risk. Obsessive compulsive disorder, Jason was just talking a little bit about that, 3.4% increased risk, and general phobias, interestingly enough, which we do see a lot of in our children. And we've seen general and specific phobias both increase for kids over the 18 to 20 months of the pandemic. There's a 2.4% increase. And this is folks that experience symptoms and or have been diagnosed with these disorders, the prevalence of them reaching to substances to help escape. And there's no age specification on this, so this is kids all the way up through adults. So this is an example, and certainly we could spend another hour going through all of the different drugs, right? But this is a really interesting graph that shows us, this is an example in the whole United States. This was 8th graders, right? So in looking, and this was the National Institute of Drug Abuse, right? The amphetamine, inhalant, and cough medicine misuse is trending upward among 8th graders. And we look at 8th graders, why? We look at 8th graders because they are kind of on that cusp, right? They're done with elementary, they're kind of on the high end of middle, and they're getting ready to go into high school. And so the way that they're going to be influenced, the way they're going to self-soothe, the way that what they're going to reach to, right? They're in that 7th, 8th grade range. It's really important to track what those kiddos are doing so that we can kind of stop it earlier. So we know, right, that past year substance misuse among 8th graders is trending upward. This graph really does show us, you'll see the bottom darker blue is cough medicine, and it goes from 2015, the year of 2015, all the way up through 2020. And then you see the amphetamine, that's kind of the middle blue layer. It shows us the rise from 2016 through 2020. And then you see the inhalant use. And when we talk about inhalant, we're talking about anything anyone can inhale to get high, anything from spray paint to glue. There's a whole range, right, of what we use as inhalants. So there is a large increase in 8th graders, and we need to be, especially our parents, teachers, coaches of kids in that 7th, 8th grade range, you need to really know that that's a really high increase that we're seeing. So there's a survey that was put out by the Recovery Village in 2020, and folks that participated in that study reported the reasons for their continued or increased substance use. Why? 53% trying to cope with stress, right? This isn't 2020, so this is pandemic. 39% were trying to relieve boredom, and 32% were trying to cope with mental health symptoms like anxiety or depression. Again, whatever we're doing as adults, the kids are watching and learning. So if 53% of participants in this study said, hey, I'm using because I'm stressed, kids are saying, oh, well, if they're stressed and they're drinking and that helps, then that's what I'm going to do. So economic stress and loneliness from COVID-19 factors also play a huge role, right, in the increase of drug and alcohol use. We know that especially that first 12 months where people really were not going out, they were not seeing family, there was this whole new normal, the loneliness was a huge factor. And people who use substances and alcohol are at a higher risk for developing COVID-19 and can experience worse outcomes, including higher risk of hospitalization and mortality. So we're increasing substance and alcohol use and then pouring COVID-19 on top of that. And that's one of the reasons that's contributing to health system overload. So what do we look for? I think this is important to talk about, right? It's very easy for us to kind of say, yeah, that really doesn't fit, that doesn't fit, you know, not my child, not my neighbor. But any one of these things are important things to look at, among others, and we'll talk about that. But one, your child may be using alcohol or drugs if you notice a dramatic change in their appearance, friends, or physical health. So when I say dramatic, I mean dramatic. It's not, you know, my daughter put green highlights in her hair. It needs to be like really something really, really noticeable that's really out of the norm for that child, not just I'm bored, I have nothing to do, I'm going to dye my hair. Also evidence of drugs and or drug paraphernalia. If you see a rolling paper, if you see little bits of something that look like green or nicotine, or, don't ignore it, right? Little baggies, behavioral problems and poor grades in school, acting out, defiance where you haven't seen it before, somebody that their grades are slipping pretty rapidly or uncharacteristically. We want to consider drug or alcohol use just in what we're looking at. We're not going to, we want to rule that out, right? So emotional distancing, isolation, depression, or fatigue. And that's such a hard one, especially during COVID, right? Because we're all emotionally distancing just by virtual of physical distancing. It's the kids that won't come on Zoom, won't put their face on the screen, haven't reached out to friends, aren't engaging in social media, are really tired and saying they can't, they just have to sleep all the time. They're sad. They're saying that they're depressed, or they're crying all the time. Folks, of any age who are overly influenced by their peers, right? They are going to go do what Joe or Jane are going to go do. Hostility, right? Hostile, irritable, or just a basic change, right, in the level of cooperation around the house. And it could be that this is a child who was always, maybe gave us a normal hard time, and now all of a sudden they're being very defiant and it's uncharacteristic. Lying or increased evasiveness, right, about after school or weekend whereabouts. Where are they? And are they telling the truth? Decrease in interest in personal appearance. All of a sudden not showering as much as they used to, not wearing deodorant. They used to wear deodorant. And I know this sounds like normal kids stuff, but none of it should be ignored, in that let's really watch, listen, and learn to see what this is really about. Decrease, the personal appearance, physical changes, right? Look at their eyes, bloodshot eyes, runny nose, frequent sore throats, rapid weight loss. Those are signs of drug use. Yeah, also strep throat and the normal kid stuff. So this is where it's easy to ignore this stuff and pass it off, or not even give a second thought to what it could be other than the normal kid stuff. We're seeing children in elementary and early middle school using drugs and alcohol at a much higher rate than we ever used to. So changes in mood, eating, or sleeping patterns, either sleeping all the time or not being able to sleep at all. Eating too much, not eating at all, right? Dizziness and memory problems. Inhalant use, could be, maybe not. Unusual odor on breath, right? Marijuana, inhalants, alcohol. Widely dilated pupils, even in bright light. And if I go back to the odor on breath, if you have a kid who never was into dental hygiene and now they're always popping mints or chewing gum or using mouthwash, what are they trying to hide an odor they don't want you to notice? Widely dilated pupils, even in bright light, or pinpoint pupils, even in dim light. Those are all signs of drug use in children and teens. And if you have any suspicion, I would encourage you to sit down and talk with your child about your concerns, have an open, honest conversation, or take that child to their family doctor or their pediatrician and have a chat with a medical professional. So moving on a little bit to factors contributing to rise of poor mental health in children during COVID-19, right? So one of the things that we look at in psychiatry are social determinants of health. What determines our health as a child, as an adolescent, as an adult? So we know that these 6 things are absolutely indicative of our level of health. Economic stability, right? Employment, income, expenses, debt, medical bills, and support. If any of those are severely disrupted to the point of upsetting or stressing the family, that affects children's mental health, right? And we've seen this, that parents' employment or change in income or debt, medical bills, all of that directly correlates to kiddos' mental health. Neighborhood and physical environment. Do they have housing? Do the kids have safe housing where there's heat, where there is not presence of rodents or bugs? Do they have transportation? Do they have parks and playgrounds or a place to go outside? Can they walk to places or friends? Zip code and geography, all of that is a determinant of health for kids. Education, right? This is where our teachers and our school administration and personnel come in. What's their literacy rate? Language, are they understanding what's being taught in class? How's the early childhood education? And let's all face it, early childhood education really has suffered during COVID because the littles certainly weren't getting a good start in terms of their development with social, as we just kind of held those little kids back, and rightfully so, so that they didn't get sick, but still is a factor. Vocational training and higher education. Now, food, right? Food is obviously a contributing factor. So is there food security? Do they get breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Do they have to wonder where their next meal is coming from? Do they have enough to eat? Access to healthy options. Do they have fruits, vegetables, a variety? They have something to choose from other than one or two things. That's where school meals come in very heavily. Community safety and social context, social integration. Are they integrating with peers? Support systems. Do they have really trusted people that support them? Community engagement. And think about that. Most of this stuff was taken away from our kids for a good long time during COVID, and still is in certain extents. Stress, exposure to violence and trauma. And let's face it, since COVID started, there's been a lot of exposure to trauma for every single person. I was talking to one of the docs the other day, and there's now no one on the face of the earth that hasn't been exposed to trauma on some level. And policing and justice policy. And then the healthcare system. Does the child have health coverage? Did they lose health coverage because parents lost insurance due to losing their jobs during the pandemic? Provider and pharmacy availability. Access to linguistically and culturally appropriate and respectful care. Are the people that are caring for them, teaching them, loving them, guiding them, sensitive to their language, to their culture, to their individual needs, and quality of care, right? So we know that all of that stuff combines to directly correlate with instance of mortality, higher or lower instance of child and adolescent death, and morbidity, life expectancy in general for everybody walking around, healthcare expenditures, health status, and functional limitations. So those are all factors that generally determine our health. And if we look at those, it's pretty easy to see why our kids' mental health has suffered as a result of the pandemic. So economic stability and food, housing and food insecurity. Just to give you some statistics about what has happened during COVID, almost half of households with children reported a loss of employment income. So that's 1 in 2 kids loss of income of some sort. 61% reported difficulty paying for usual household expenses in late March of 2021, right? Household expenses, 61%. Some students and families rely on school for breakfast and lunch, and now they're not going to school for breakfast and lunch. So for a lot of kids, there was no food, right? So neighborhood and physical environment, increased stress within the household. Like I said, the kids watch us. Parents are experiencing more stress, right? And poor mental health during the pandemic. And parents have had to balance both work and childcare, and possibly work out of their home and be child caregiver and juggle all of those balls in the air while trying to keep everyone safe and figure out how to pay their electric bill. Playgrounds closing. Kids that had a certain spot to go play, to socialize, lost that. And then lack of community sports and activities just in general has contributed. So other factors contributing to poor mental health in our kiddos is education, right? Virtual learning. It's amazing, and it's amazing what the educational system in the United States has done to stand up virtual learning almost overnight. It's a blessing and a curse. One of the things that we know is that people's brains don't stop developing until their early 20s, right? So one of the things that is happening is that kids who, and this is everybody, but we're talking about kids, there are parts of our brain that as human beings, we haven't had to really use a lot because we haven't done all of this virtual stuff this much, this often, to this extent. So there's a part of our brains that's getting used heavier, harder, more often. And if you kind of picture it as a rubber band and you just start to stretch it a little bit, it's getting stretched really fast, really quickly. And if we think about our little kids' brains that aren't even developed yet or finished developing, that virtual learning is stressing out parts of our brain that in the history of human development have never been exercised before. Which is, again, Jason had talked earlier about the OCD and the anxiety and the tics. That's where we're seeing tics come in. Okay, now good news, right, is that our brain's an amazing thing. And for most of our kids who are starting to show signs of tics, it's because of that increased brain stretching and workout. And we're seeing within 3 to 4 weeks, a lot of that subsides. Still has to get looked at by a medical professional, but we kind of know some of the reasons. Connectivity issues and access to reliable technology. Lots of kids don't have that. Parents had to juggle working and monitoring their children and teens' schoolwork, right? Kids weren't sure how to learn online. Parents have never had to learn online for the most part, so they were doing it together. Zoom fatigue, it's a real thing. You get burned out being online all day long. And then anxiety about returning to school. Now the kids are kind of like, okay, I get it. This is how we're going to do it. And now I have to go back. Well, how is it that you're going to let me back when it wasn't safe to go before? So all of that stress running around little kids' heads. Healthcare systems, right? We had a huge break in the continuity of healthcare, meaning maybe we missed our regular pediatric checkups, our wellness visits, vaccines that are normally expected during certain times of development, having a doctor have eyes on kids as they grow, limited access to mental, speech, and occupational health care. Kids that needed that help in those areas maybe weren't getting it. 2019. Right? 11% of kiddos aged 3 to 17 received mental health care, right? In that past year, in 2019. But if we look at among Medicaid and Children's Health Insurance Program, so CHIP, the number of children receiving mental health services dropped by 50% from February to October 2020. Kids were not getting what they needed in terms of their mental health services. And then private mental health care claims also decreased from 2019 to 2020. So we see the rise in mental health issues, the rise in substance use issues, and the pretty dramatic decrease in mental health care as evidenced by claims, right? So it's a lot. It sounds, as I'm saying it out loud, it is not good. But it's also what we have to remember is that our kids are strong and they're resilient, and we can learn from them, right? The one thing that we have to remember is that changes in routine for these kids has been a real issue. We know that kids like boundaries, they like routine. They may resist it, but in general, they need it and they like it. They've had changes in all of that. Sports. Kids that are in sports or theater or music or clubs that they love, having that end was really isolating. So nearly 25% of all high school students reported feeling disconnected from their classmates, and then loneliness, like we talked about. missed significant life events, proms, graduations, celebrations, vacations, milestone life events. My son turned 21 during the pandemic, was home because college was closed. And he turned 21 during the time where nothing was open. It was zero. So 21 was not what he had envisioned it. And that's okay. As a mom, that's okay with me. But, big life events, people missed out on them. Economic stressors can increase children's risk for exposure to violence, right? Child abuse, neglect, domestic partner violence. We've seen a huge rise in domestic violence. And one of the things that Children and Youth and the Department of Human Services reports is an increased reporting in child abuse claims. And the fact that if kids are in an abusive household, now they're with those abusers more often, or they're watching domestic violence happen. Loss of security and safety, right? Increased exposure to violence, right? And online harms, and uncertainty for the future. They can't trust that anything is safe because we haven't been able to promise them that. So Jason, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about transitioning back to school.
Yes. Speaking of transitioning back to school, a lot of that had to do with going from a virtual environment to an in-person environment. And there's a lot of software things and computer things that can go on with that. And just to say that I got a message just a few moments ago that popped up on my computer that it needs to install updates, and it tried to restart. I snoozed it, but you might lose me for a few minutes if it has to restart. So just wanted to bring that up real quick. So looking at the transitioning back to school, a lot of schools were closed last year. Some of them stayed open the whole year. Some of them stayed open in a hybrid system. Some of them were closed completely, and we're still seeing some of that this year. So reopening the schools means that there's a new start. So children will be away from home again after a long break. Think about when your kids are on summer vacation, and that's like 2.5 to 3 months. Getting them back into school after 2.5 to 3 months is nearly impossible at times. These kids they're used to going to bed at 5 o'clock in the morning and getting up at noon. Well, now they got to go to bed at 8, 9 o'clock at night and get up at 5 in the morning. So it's really a disruption to their schedules. Looking at some of the kindergartners that we have that are going into first grade, this is their first time actually transitioning back to school for full time. So some of these kids have never even been in school. They have no idea what to expect when they get there. And then, of course, we had some remote students that are now transitioning back to in-person schooling for the first time in 1.5 years. Some of these kids are going to have a lot of anxiety about transitioning back in because they've been used to being in their bedrooms or their living rooms or their dining rooms doing everything. And now they're coming back to a much more structured environment that they're not ready for. As we know, transitions just in general are difficult for children, going to bed, going from one classroom to the next classroom, getting up in the morning, all of that. So some of our school-age children that are overly sensitive or easily worried, or even with developmental delays and intellectual disability, they're going to need extra time to adjust. School might look and feel different due to safety protocols. Some schools, they're wearing masks. That's going to be very different. They're going to maybe get mask breaks. You're going to have some people in your school wearing a mask and some people not wearing a mask. You're going to have teachers that are doing a hybrid classroom where there's still some children that are working from a virtual environment. So there's computers set up in the back of the room for the kids to watch. And it can be very disruptive to the other students, to the teachers, to everyone. Some children are aware that the COVID-19 risk just has to be with being around other people, and they might not understand exactly how it spreads. So they're worried about getting sick and being around people. And, we've heard, maintain that 6 feet of distance, or, oh, no, we can't do that. So at least be 4 feet of distance. And you're on a bus and you've got 3 people in a seat. How do you stay 4 feet apart? And what we know is that school might continue to change throughout the school year due to the pandemic. We never know what's going to happen. There's a lot of variants that are coming out. Some of them are much worse than others. We're seeing a rise in cases right now for where people are getting sick, and there's more people that are going back onto ventilators or going to the emergency room. So we never know exactly what's going to happen in our communities and in the whole state with the whole school system and what it's going to do. So some signs and symptoms to look out for the behavioral changes in your children. How do we know when they're getting stressed, when they're getting depressed, when they're getting anxious? And a lot of these are going to mimic some of the things that Amie talked about with increased or starting drug and alcohol use. But you're going to see some kids excessive crying or irritation. Again, change is difficult. Any kind of changes, and school systems could change on a day-to-day basis between your ABC block and your DEF block, and which class do I have today, and do I have gym, or am I supposed to go to orchestra, or is this a study hall? You're going to get some major irritation from that, and then kids breaking down and crying. You may see some kids that return to some of the behaviors that they've outgrown, like bedwetting, separation anxiety. I work in a school system as a therapist, and I'm seeing a lot of kids that don't want to come to school because they're afraid of leaving their parents' home because they've been with them for the past year. They have this feeling that if I go to school and something happens to my mom, it's my fault because I wasn't there. You're going to see changes in eating or sleeping habits, whether it is, restricted eating where they're just not hungry because of that anxiety, or you're going to have that, if you're like me, you're going to overeat because of the stress. Sleeping habits, again, kids were sleeping over the summer and during the school year last year. They were going to bed at like 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and not getting up till 12. So you're going to have a lot of weird sleeping habits like that. But now that they're going back to school, some kids are still staying up till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and then getting up at 5 o'clock to go to school. Again, we talked about the irritability and the acting out behaviors, but specifically in teens, you're going to see that, extra defiance that they may not have had before. And again, in children, you're going to have the anger outbursts and the tantrums. Obviously, with school changing so much and home changing and the socialization, you're going to see possibly some poor school performance or just avoiding school in general. When your anxiety is that high, you don't want to be around people, so you may not go to school. And then while you're there, you're preoccupied about everything else, so you're going to have that poor school performance. And, especially with last year, if your kids were virtual, sometimes that virtual environment just didn't work to teach them what they needed to. And some kids took a real hit to their self-esteem, and they thought, I was a straight A student right up until virtual, and now I can barely scrape by with D's, and now I'm back in school and I don't know if I can do this anymore. Difficulties with attention and concentration. If you're thinking all the time about the effects of COVID-19 on you and not being able to see friends, and are we going to have school tomorrow? And, I hate wearing this mask. It's itchy, but I know that I have to keep other people from being sick. You're not going to be able to concentrate on what you're supposed to be doing. You have some kids that activities that they really enjoy doing, a lot of the times they enjoy doing, number one, just because they like doing it. But number two, there was the socialization aspect. I love playing softball, but my friends are here too, so that gives me that extra benefit. Well, now all of a sudden they're avoiding some of those activities because they're just not as fun for them anymore. Unexplained headaches and body pain. We know that one of the major things that stress can cause is physical symptoms, whether it's stomach aches, headaches, joint pain, even in kids as young as 5, 6 years old. And then again, to follow on what Amie said, that use of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. So how do we support our children during these transition times? Well, here's some things that teachers and administration at schools can do. Obviously, build your relationships with your students and your families. I see it firsthand where the administrators stand out in the hallway while the children are walking around. They say hi, they give that positive encouragement, they let them know that everything is going to be okay. Seeing your administration in the hallways and their bright, positive faces is going to make you feel less stressed, or going to make your kids feel less stressed, the students. Developing set schedules and set routines. And I think that the schools have done a great job with this, where, you know, they've really specified, this is what we're going to do during the school day. This is when your period starts and ends. This is how long you have to get to class. This is when you're going to be able to have your clubs or your sports or all of that. Those set schedules and routines are crucial for your kids. And then, of course, adjusting that expectations. Again, we had a lot of kids last year who failed the school year. So adjusting your expectations and letting them know that, yes, coming back to school this year is going to be difficult. There's a lot of changes. There's things that we have to do that maybe we don't want to do, but we all have to do this, and we're all in it together. As teachers and administrators, you have to be able to expect that there's going to be some behavioral changes. Behavioral changes doesn't necessarily mean that kids are going to be violent and upset and cranky. It could mean you're going to have some of those kids that were previously outgoing who no longer want to sit in the front of the class. They no longer want to be the first one with their hand up and answering questions. They're going to be, you know, sullen and a little bit depressed, and you're going to need to help bring them out of their shells a little bit more. Again, just by providing that emotional support. And then for teachers and administrations, I can't say this more than enough, self-care. You must take care of yourself. And I always think of the airplane analogy with this. If there is something wrong with an airplane and those little masks dangle down, you must put yours on first before you have any hope of helping anybody else. That's what self-care is all about. And self-care is what really grounds us and refreshes us and gets us back out there every day to be that positive role model. Some tips for parents, because you're the guys who are home with the kids almost, you know, longer than the teachers are there with them. So again, maintain that normal routine. You know, dinner time is at this time. You can watch TV at this time. You can have this much amount of time on your electronics. This is what time you need to go to bed and start your hygiene. This is what time you need to get up in the morning. They need to have that normal routine to feel normal. Talk, listen, and encourage their expressions of emotions. You know, a lot of kids just want to express that they're afraid, or they want to cry, or they want to talk about missing their friends. Let them do that and listen to them. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with everything that they say. You know, if your kids are like, oh, I'm depressed and I want to stay up till 2 o'clock playing video games. Okay, I hear you, but that's not practical. You still have to go to school. So we're going to have that normal routine, but I'm also going to listen to you and encourage you to express how you're feeling to me. Answer questions and share facts about COVID-19 in a way that your child can understand. So a teenager and an adolescent is going to understand a lot better than a 5-year-old. So being able to explain COVID-19 in a way that's developmentally appropriate for your children, and make sure that you're getting the facts from, you know, the right spots like the CDC and the WHO. And a lot of the times your schools are going to have great information and facts. Get this information and facts from your healthcare providers. Every healthcare provider in the world right now that has a web page has a COVID-19 huge banner across the top where you can get information. And a lot of that information is going to show you how to talk to kids as young as 5 and as old as, you know, 25 if they're in college. Amie had said this a lot. Our kids are watching us, so we have to be a role model for them. We have to, you know, get our own self-care by taking breaks and sleep and exercise and eating well. We have to show them that it is okay to get out there and connect with friends and family members. If you can't do that in person, then there's virtual ways of doing this. You know, I've seen it a lot over the past year, being able to have these presentations that you're seeing today in a virtual forum right from the comfort of your own home. You're getting out there to more people. Spend time with your child in meaningful activities. So read together, exercise, play board games, do the things that make you a family. And then again, I can't stress this enough, and I'm going to keep saying it over and over and over. Self-care is important. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anybody else. So how do we reduce stress and substance use? Stress is all around us. We have it on a normal basis. Now you throw COVID-19 on there, you throw the changes in school, you throw all of the rules and regulations and policies. So number one, set limits, such as time constraints for work and school. Don't allow your work and school activities to blend into family time. I saw this so much last year when kids had this virtual schooling where, well, I'm in my bedroom doing school, I'm in my bedroom talking to my friends, I'm eating my dinner in my bedroom, everything is my bedroom, but I'm not really spending time anywhere else and with the rest of my family. Make sure that you're getting back to your normal routine. Limit your exposure to social media and news reporting. Social media is one of the biggest sources for misinformation. I can't tell you how many kids I see that are like, oh, I saw this on TikTok, so it must be true. No, I don't think so. Also, watching the news over and over and over every day is going to increase your stress because the news prides itself on showing you all the scary stuff. That's what the news is. That's what people want to see. It's, like watching the train wreck. You can't walk away from it. In this case, with the news, turn off the TV, set those limits. Incorporate exercise, meditation, and healthy living into our lives. 30 minutes a day of walking 3 to 4 days a week. That's what you really need. It's 30 minutes a day for 3 to 4 days. That's really not a lot of time. Drink plenty of water, eat healthier snacks. So often we want to grab potato chips or run to Burger King or McDonald's or, order in the delivery. You can still order in, you can still go out, you can still have snacks. Just make them something a bit healthier so that you feel better. Again, set a specific dinner time every night for the family. That goes back with that setting limits. And again, when you're having dinner with your family, it's with your family. It shouldn't be on your phones or on your tablets or watching TV. Include some time in your dinner about talking about what's worrying all the members of the family, whether it's COVID-19 or whether you're worried about, what you're doing in school and the grades that you're getting. And a great thing, again, this goes back to the self-care, start a new hobby or revive an old one. This is a great time for creativity. If we can't go out of the house, we're going to be bored if we're just sitting around watching TV or doing nothing. Now's a great time to pick up a musical instrument, start reading, start writing. I started crocheting. I didn't even know I could do it. So these are things that you have time to do now. All right, Amy, here you go.
Thanks, Jason. And Jason, I did not know you started crocheting, and I would love to see some of your work because I know how creative you are. So I'm assuming you're probably good at it. So COVID-19 through a grief lens. Everyone has lost a lot. And if we take a look at children and teens and what they may be grieving and what some of the symptoms that we're seeing may be attributed to, grief, stages of grieving, right? Denial. And at the beginning of COVID, everybody was like, yeah, it'll be 2 weeks, we'll be good, right? Depression, bargaining, anger, acceptance, and we move through those back and forth all the time. Kids do too, right? So any of these outbursts that you're seeing could very well be attributed to grieving and all of the loss. And they've not only lost possibly people, right? They may have lost people to COVID through death that they knew or loved, but they've lost friends, routines, life events, sporting events, possibly an academic dream or an academic goal. So there's been a whole lot of loss, and certainly we know that that's attributed, that COVID has played a large role in that. So what do we do about that in terms of helping our kiddos who may be experiencing grief or loss? So we want to ask questions and check in with the child or teen to better understand their perceptions of the event and their emotional state. So if they have lost a loved one to COVID or a friend, ask age-appropriate questions, right? I guess is the way I want to put it. Ask how they're feeling, what they think happened, what their thoughts about it are, what their, have them draw pictures if they're littler. We need to allow them to express their thoughts in creative ways, maybe through music or through crocheting or through graphic arts. And we need to practice calming and coping strategies with our kids. I want to stress that there are some really great applications on the web and some really great YouTube channels for meditating, mindfulness, to help us, as adults, kind of center ourselves and deep breathe and get ourselves into a calm place. And we want to teach kids how to do that too, right? So we want to spend time with our kids doing activities they enjoy, and also introducing some mindfulness and some calming activities to them. The other part that's important here is to have the child or teen label their feelings. And how we do that, it can be as simple as, a chart with faces on it, and help them understand and name a feeling rather than just fine, okay, We want to talk about joyful, sad, and go through what is a feeling. And for a lot of kids, especially with 2 years now of kind of stunted development, they may not be real good at that. So we have to help them. And we have to acknowledge what we can and cannot control, right? And we have to teach kids that there are some things out of our control. What is in our control? What can you do about this situation? What can you do to change it? We can't change other people, but we can work on ourselves. We want to do fun stuff, have coloring books out, use an adult coloring book with colored pencils and model that while you're, spending free time. Play a sport, watch a family TV show, set up, some sort of new sport in your yard or in your garage that you can make up rules for. Progressive muscle relaxation, teaching kids how to relax their muscles. A lot of us have just been tense for 1.5 years. Have we really let our shoulders down? Have we really done deep breathing? Are we teaching that to our kids? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you're unsure of how to teach kids how to do breath counting, you breathe in for 5, hold for 5, and out for 5. You can practice that and teach that, right? And the easy way to do that, especially for the littles, is to use your 5 fingers, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. So kids really do understand that. And if we can teach kids mindfulness and some of that breathing and self-calming activity at home, and we practice that, even making it an absolute to do before bed or when they get up in the morning, that's hugely helpful. I'm going to let Jason talk more about that.
Thank you, Amie. And so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a neat grounding exercise that I do with all of my kids. It's one of the very first exercises that I teach them. And it's what's called a grounding exercise. So it really makes you realize that you're here now in the present, which is the only place that you have control over things. So it's looking at 5 things that you can see. So you just look around the room, you look at 5 things, you kind of describe what they look like, you don't have to be overly descriptive, but just 5 things. 4 things that you can feel. Just sitting in your chair, you can feel, your maybe your computer, your desk, your shirt, your seat that you're sitting in. You can feel maybe the air conditioning on your face. 3 things that you can hear. It's amazing what you can hear when you actually stop talking and you listen. I have a clock in my office in the middle school that I provide therapy in. And every time I do this, the kids get this like shocked look on their face, like, oh my God, I can hear the clock. Yes, you can hear the clock, or you can hear the air conditioning. 2 things that you can smell. So in my office, I keep some scented candles. I keep some aromatherapy things. If you're in a place where you don't have that, then what are 2 smells that you enjoy? Whether it's like, rain in a thunderstorm outside, what that smells like, walking through a pine forest, something like that. And then the number 1 is something you can taste. I keep little candies in my office, sugar-free chocolate, things like that. But if you don't have any of that, what is your favorite food? And describe to me what it tastes like. Also on here is the 5-finger breathing. So when we do this, especially with our kids, it's breathe in on the upstroke and then breathe out, and then breathe in and breathe out, breathe in and out all the way through your hand. So that the last one is breathe in and then breathe out. It's easy to show a kid that because they can time it themselves. They can go as fast as they want or as slow as they want, but it's a really a great way to model this. Some progressive muscle relaxation that Amie was talking about here. Here's a specific way of doing it. It has to do with, taking 3 deep breaths. You're going to squeeze your foot for 5 seconds and relax. Squeeze your leg, that's both your calves and your thighs, for 5 seconds, then relax. Your stomach, move up to your shoulders, and then your arms and hands. And then you do your whole body all at once, and you let go, and you take those 3 deep breaths. This is a great skill that I teach kids, especially kids that are having a hard time trying to fall asleep at night. This progressive muscle relaxation, when they're lying there, they will fall asleep almost instantly. I'm a geek therapist, so I have to use geek stuff. So we've got the emotions of Sonic the Hedgehog. This is great for especially little kids, but I use this with adolescents too. So don't discount that age range there. Anything from like 5 to 18, everybody loves Sonic the Hedgehog. You can obviously use, the Mario Brothers if you need to do that, or, whatever your pop culture icons are. But this is that emotional expression. It teaches your kids what they're feeling when they're looking a certain way. I know I use anime a lot, because in anime, when you see somebody crying, you know why they're crying. They're either sad, they hurt themselves, just because of the expression on the face. This is a great way to teach your kids what they're feeling, and then be able to talk with them about it. I didn't skip the questions. We're going to do questions, but I just wanted to make sure that we have the bibliography here so that people can see some of the resources that we have available. So I guess now I want to, throw it over to the masses and see what kind of questions you guys have.
I also want to say thank you to all of you for staying with us tonight and being with us. And I want to let Ryan, certainly if anything has come up during the presentation that you've noted that you want us to address from the chat, we can do that now as well. Or you may have to process this if you're like me, and then tomorrow you'll think of 3 things, and that's fine. You can get in touch with us for sure.
I just wanted to say I think you both did a really great job, and somebody who also does presentation and engages with youth around mental health and substance use prevention. You guys are right on, so it's good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I just want to thank Jason and Amie so much for the event. And can you guys let the people know, I'm getting some personal texts that are asking about slides and where they can watch the recorded event again. And are you guys going to send out supplemental information for other events that you have and other things?
Yeah, we sure can. You can always go to the St. Luke's website. St. Luke's Penn Foundation and activities and events will usually be posted there. Certainly through the Pennridge Community Partnership, they'll keep you abreast of anything new going on. If there's anything you guys think, wow, we'd really like to have this, or we'd really like to see this, certainly let us know, right? Because we're as one big community, we're all in this together, like Jason said. So we do trainings all the time. We do community lectures all the time. I'm sure that this recording will be posted. I'll have to talk with more with Lisa and Ryan and Deb about exactly where, but we will post it, and we'll make sure that everybody on this thread knows where it's posted for sure. So that's going to happen. I'm just not sure if it'll be posted on the St. Luke's website or with Pennridge. So we'll find that out and we'll let you know.
Okay,
we also have some past videos up on YouTube and Vimeo. So St. Luke's is big on both of those platforms for a lot of our past presentations that we've done that have been recorded too.
That's great. There actually is a question too. I'll just read it out for you, and either Amie or Jason or both. Sue Bowers is asking if you have any tips for teachers that are seeing increased negative behaviors in the classroom now that they're back in school full time. So being in school full time, have you seen any increase negative, any tips for teachers that may be seeing those increased negative behaviors? And they also stated that the information for home is great, but how can teachers help kids to feel like they are safe inside schools?
So I'm just going to real quickly, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, but I think his 5-finger breathing technique and the grounding technique of, okay, everybody right now, take out a pencil and paper. What are 5 things you see? What are 4 things you smell? You want to ground everybody, get everybody back. If there are kids who are being defiant, being oppositional, you want to get their attention. You want to have them stop and breathe. You have to get them out of their emotion and then into relaxation. And that takes a lot of practice. It is not easy. And I commend you, teachers. You are heroes, absolutely. It is important that you make sure they know every morning, you're safe here. You're safe here. This is a safe place. School is a safe place. And we're all here together. You're not alone. And you want to keep reassuring them. Jason?
Yeah, I want to reiterate what you said. You teachers are absolute superheroes. You're amazing, and I know that you can't do this by yourself. You have a whole classroom of kids that you're trying to teach. So you can use some planned ignorance as long as the kids are not being unsafe to other people or to themselves. You can ignore some of it. A lot of our teachers like to use positive consequences. So you know what, everybody, if you can sit in your seats for the next 10 minutes and get through this stuff that I have, we'll play a short game after that. Again, setting these time limits, especially in the classroom, is going to be important for that, where I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes of straight lesson planning. You're gonna have to sit here and do that stuff. Then we're going to take a small break where we'll maybe play a game, maybe have like a quick bathroom break, or a quick mask break. In certain schools they do that. And then we're going to have to come back and we're going to have to do some more work again. So really structuring your class where you're doing the work, a small break, work, a small break, that's going to be the best way to get these kids back into their seats and doing what they need to do. And as teachers, make the stuff fun. I know that you have to teach from a curriculum, but get the kids engaged in it. There's nothing worse than a kid sitting there having to write notes for 45 minutes and not being able to talk about anything while they're sitting there squirming in their seat and trying to dance. Get them up and moving a little bit, even if it's at the beginning of the class or the middle of the class or the end of the class. Give them something to look forward to. That's really my biggest tip. And at the school that I'm working at, I see the teachers doing that, and the ones that are doing that consistently are the ones that aren't having the problems with the kids. But that's a great question, and that's one I see that comes up all the time. So thank you for that.
And yeah, somebody also had asked earlier about the PowerPoint. So I don't know what your guys' stance is on the PowerPoint, if it can be sent out as a PowerPoint or in a PDF form with the information. But we do have everyone's emails, so we can make sure if we have that information that we can send stuff out post the webinar.
I don't see why I couldn't convert this to a PDF. That way people can have the information, especially with the bibliography and those coping skills that are on there. I would love people to have that. But the statistics are good too, because that's what you can show your kids. When your kids are asking what is going on with this, show me something. This way you'll have that.
Yep.
So I think what I'll do is I can convert this to a PDF and get this over to you, Ryan, and that way it can be disseminated to everybody who needs it.
That's great. And again, we have everyone's email, so we'll make sure to send that stuff out.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
It's a lot of thank yous, a lot of great information, great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, this was really awesome.
Wonderful presentation.
So glad.
And thank you everybody that was on, that joined us virtually tonight. Very grateful that you guys were all here, and look forward to seeing everybody in our January event.
Do you want to say anything else, Lisa, too, about the Pennridge Community Partnership? And
No, pretty much what I said in the beginning, and it's just growing. We're just starting at the very beginning. So this is just the beginning of something that we want to grow into something bigger, because mental health really should be at the forefront. And it's not. And we really, in this partnership, want mental health at the forefront because it's so needed right now for teachers and students and parents. And I love the fact that you talked about teacher self-care, because sometimes teachers are the forgotten heroes sitting back, you know, and they really need the care.
Yeah, and the guidance and your guidance
counselors. Oh, 100%. Guidance counselors, therapists, all of them, everybody.
Yeah. So I always say, if you're going to do like a deep breathing, you're not just doing it for them, you're doing it for you. So you're, you know, 2 for the price of 1.
And just one thing I really want to say, and I haven't got a chance to say this, is that this is especially great for me because I am a Pennridge alumni. I graduated Pennridge in '92, and I still remember a lot of the teachers that I had, and they were the ones that were inspirational to me and made me get into the field that I am now. So I really do want to thank the Pennridge community for making me who I am today. So go Rams.